Hey.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to Embolden, the show where we talk about controversial topics in comics and pop culture in an adult way where everybody speaks, everybody's respectful. And I have with me a good friend of mine, Josh Pantelleresco, who is an amazing comic writer, traditional writer, does a lot of good work on his show. Talking Josh, right? Did I get that right?
Yeah, you got it right, man. Like I said, you got it right. You knew it. You knew what I was saying.
Oh, thank God, thank God. I thought it was that, but I'm just making sure. And obviously, you also do a lot of advertisements and advertisement services for comic creators as well. So obviously, I'm going to let you just sort of speak about that for a few minutes at the start of the episode before we get into the topic of how to deal with bad actors in Kickstarter.
So, ladies and gentlemen, I do a whole bunch of different things. I can produce shows for you. I'm currently working on a massage therapy show. It's going to be launching. I'm hoping Valentine's Day, but maybe March 1st. I'm looking at that. Yeah. I do educational content. Who knew, right? I do that. I do advertising services, not just for comic creators, but also for authors, other brand. Basically, build your brand, build yourself, invest in yourself. I help you guys do that using my platform to help you guys to get access to that. I have my advertising services for that. Also, I write comics, I write books, I do all kinds of stuff. So it's fun.
Yeah, and I'm going to give you a chance at the end of this to promote yourself too. But obviously, I wanted to speak to you. Obviously, as I stated, this show is an adult conversation about controversial topics in comics and pop culture. And today's episode is a pet peeve of mine, and it's dealing with bad actors in Kickstarter. And so the reason why and then my perspective is that in the last 18 months, I've been screwed over by about 6 different Kickstarters. And I've backed about 60 of them, so that's a pretty high number for me. And
10%.
so I'm a little bit upset and I'm getting annoyed because what I'm finding is that there really is no recourse. Kickstarter doesn't take any responsibility, and I don't think the community has actually really called out bad actors. And I'm a free market guy. And so obviously I think where I kind of want to start is that what is a bad actor? Because I don't think somebody who wrote a comic book and then got cancer and is going through chemotherapy and now is 6 months late is a bad actor. But I think somebody who potentially, and this is how I view it, took the money and then they said their book was going to be out in a year, and then they were working with an artist and then their artist screwed them and they didn't update, and now they're really behind the realm, and now it's month 15, so it's 3 months late, and then they tell their audience that, hey, my artist stole the money. That's more of what I think is a bad actor in it. So I'm curious your opinion on
So
that.
I've had my fair share of Kickstarters just not work out either for different reasons. Not me personally doing a Kickstarter, although that might be happening soon this year, but more along the lines of like projects not coming to fruition. I don't necessarily. I think here's the thing. There's two things about Kickstarter that a lot of people don't, when they go in, don't really think about. Let's say, for example, I have all these cool bells and whistles, right? All these cool little bells and whistles I want, like maybe a T-shirt, maybe a cup, maybe a buttons and stuff like that. A lot of creatives aren't, and I speak that this from my own experiences, aren't necessarily good business people, and that they don't factor in all these budgets. It's very possible, and I've seen this where and was a lot more common in the early days than now, where they would get their funding and not cover their bonus stuff, let alone the book. So what do you do? Do you go and do another Kickstarter to make up the difference, right? I mean, you're kind of stuck in a rock and a hard place. It still happens to this day. So I think there are some bad actors. So there's two kinds of bad actors. There's the shit happens and I fail to communicate bad actors, right? Which is what you're talking about, and I know of at least one personally myself that's an incredibly bad actor that way, and I feel really awkward because I did Alice in Wonder, so I do an Alice in Wonderland series, and with Kenzie Carr / Kenzie Katz, and we're and she kicks ass, and she's going to do her own stuff now, and it's really cool. I went to be auditioning for someone to do Alice 2 and Alice 3, but all of which to say that but the thing is, right, one of the times I asked for an artist for the series, the bad actor that didn't back the Kickstarter actually came to me for work. And that was awkward. That was like, wow, like that. I never, like one of those 1 in a million moments, right? But the thing about it is, and this is something I've understood about this, is I don't know if every bad actor intends to become a bad actor. I think that's circumstance. The ones that I really have a problem with are the ones that, okay, they're poor planners and they suck, but that's a life lesson thing. And as long as you don't repeat that process, right, I'm willing to give the first one a pass. It's the ones that are trying to rip people off, that come up with this promise of a project and never deliver at all. Those guys piss me off the more. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So they come with a project idea. They might have 8 pages done. They have no intention of ever finishing the book, and then they run away with the money.
Yeah.
And then that's what happens. So I'll explain my circumstance. That's really the impetus for this. I'm not going to name the book, but it's not that hard to figure out whose book it is. They raised about a little under $9,000 for a 5-issue graphic novel. Now, this is what happened. Books is going to take a year. I get it. So now no updates all along. So they're a poor communicator. Fine. That's not necessarily a bad actor, in my opinion, because your book's not late. You do not have to update me. It would be nice if you did, but
it is a flag. I would call that a flag, though.
I'm being very lenient for a reason, because when it doesn't become lenient, and in this little story is that, great, now it's a year, no updates. It's now month 13. So now we're a month late, 2 months late. Now it's July. The book was supposed to be in my hands by May of the following year. Now I'm like, where's the book? And no updates. And then finally there's an update, and it's like, oh, this is what happened. I'm letting you know what's going to happen next. And since that update, there's been no other updates. Meanwhile, this person then did another campaign with another company and did over $20,000. That's where this becomes an issue, because I feel disrespected that I backed your project. And as a consumer, I also feel weird because this other company, I don't know if they know this. And I don't know how they should be handling that, because that's a bad faith position, I feel, to some degree, that somebody didn't deliver on their Kickstarter, and yet they've done now 2 Kickstarters that have raised $40,000. And meanwhile, they have one that's outstanding with no updates. And so the way I view it is that this person abandoned that project. The project is as good as dead, and that's my issue. And that's where I really determine a bad actor. Versus there was somebody who did a comic and then he got deployed in a military organization.
Okay.
That's different completely.
No. Like real life circumstances. Like, again, there are. I think here's the thing. As long as communicate, this is why I say communication is such an important thing. If there's a lack of it, it's a flag. It's because if you're communicating with people, right, I at least know something's happening. There's a certain degree of, there's an accountability. This is kind of why I think like if the lack of communication to me is such a flag, because if I don't get communication, what that's telling me is either something's really going wrong behind the scenes they don't want to talk to me about, which that's fine. I don't even know everything. But there's also a lack of accountability, right? And that to me is a big warning sign. Someone that's usually doing a project and is enthused will talk about it regularly, especially on Kickstarter. Yeah, like you'll get updates up until the project's done, right? And they're really good Kickstarters do this very well. So communication is really good. I think life, and again, life happens to us all. Like there are things that
I just want to clarify that circumstance. The person who's not communicating is different from the person who got deployed. The person who got deployed.
No. But let me finish the point. Let me finish the point. So, but the thing is, if the person's deployed, or the person's going through a divorce, or gets cancer, or what tends to happen there is if it, again, they will still communicate that point to you. Usually, right? They usually will say something. Hey, listen, I'd love to do this. but I got deployed, or I have to battle cancer, or I'm going through a divorce, or my house foreclosed, or any circumstance that can really just mess you up. They don't like necessarily going in, again, they don't necessarily need to give you a detailed scenario, but I got that. Okay, I know what's going on, right? The bad acting comes from, again, when there's no communication. When there's none, then you should worry, right? And even if it's for the best of reasons, right? I feel like I've taken your money or I've taken your time. I owe you at least to let you know what's going on. And that, as a Kickstarter, as a creative, that is super important. And I think, and so above all else, you can get a lot of a pass. I'm just saying this, like what you're talking about, like real life stuff, you will get a huge pass if you tell people what's going on. Because then people, all right, people will get it and they'll leave you be. And again, one thing about Kickstarter too is people are used to their shit being late. Like if things are late, it's a normal occurrence on Kickstarter. It's kind of one of those acceptable things just because, right? So I emphasize this. Now to your second point, I think this is a more interesting one. If a company knows that the person's a bad actor or not, that's trickier. I think that's tricky. That's more interesting, right? I know because, okay, you know this too. In the comic industry, there are certain people that have a reputation, good, bad, or indifferent. They have a reputation, and sometimes people are exactly what they're reputed, and sometimes people aren't. Experience with people varies, right? If the company, for example, let's say the company that guy's working with, he always delivers work. He's always on time. He's always professional. And he's a fuck up in his own projects. So by your track record, he's great. By your track record, personally, Andrew, this guy's a piece of shit. so this is the thing, right? That's trickier, right? Because now you gotta look at that. Now that's the thing. Now the company may not know about his personal projects, but what they're caring about, and this is the business aspect, is he delivering for us? I'll give you like I'm going to bring a well-known example of this in the comics. Jonathan Hickman sometimes with his Image books versus Jonathan Hickman with his Marvel books. Marvel made sure all his stuff was on time. I also think they probably secretly chained him to a desk and held a whip over him to make sure that he delivered on time. But that's neither here nor there. But his Image work would sometimes take months, or in some cases, years, right? So so again, you're Marvel. He sucks on his own, right? He sucks on his own, but he's great for you. What do you do?
Yeah, no. It's very tricky because I mean, obviously, this is where I go into this, and it's not just that one issue. It's also the idea that I guess it's what. Also, I think it depends how big the screw up was. If somebody took $100,000 and didn't deliver, and they go to another company, obviously, if they're more known, I think that also does carry some more weight because I think that these are more individual issues than a collective issue sometimes. So if I'll throw a name out there that does a great job, Pat Shand. Pat Shand does a great job. If all of a sudden Pat Shand didn't deliver his 100,000 book Cheeky, and Zenescope then goes and hires him, and it's well known that he didn't deliver, or he did $1 million Kickstarter on a comic and he didn't deliver it, and then he ran away with the money, I think that'd be a different circumstance. Pat doesn't do that, but I think the idea is that, but versus somebody who took $9,000 and then goes to another company, because I think there's a different level, I guess, when you become bigger, it becomes, I think, a little bit different too.
To a point, but I mean, the fundamentals are the same. That's the thing, right? The fundamentals are the same. Ultimately, if things go great, communicate. If things go to shit, communicate, right? And almost every bad actor out there, this is not just for Kickstarter, but for any kind of professional, it's about expectations. Okay, I'll use the example here. I screwed up. Like when I said, I 2 weeks ago, for this podcast, and it was on me. And I apologized to him straight up. It was on me, right? But see what I did there? I owned my mistake. I communicated my mistake. I apologized, and we moved on. Right? That right? And that,
what did I say back? I said we'll figure out another day.
exactly. No, but it doesn't matter. I made a commitment. I couldn't make it, so it was my fault, right? So, and I do take that stuff seriously, right? I take like when I don't come through, right? Again, I'm fallible. I don't come through perfectly on everything I set out to do either. I don't look at it like that. What I look at is, what are you doing? What are the steps you're doing to try to make things right, or at least own up to your mistakes, right? That is the difference between a bad actor and someone who's screwed up, right? And that's the difference. And it doesn't matter how big the money pie is on that, right? What matters is, what are they fundamentally doing, right? And if they're fundamentally, if the fundamental is, I'm taking your money and running, and I'm not telling you what the hell's going on, well, I'm not going to trust you again, because why would I, right? Right? And if you're the company taking that person in, that particular individual in, and they have especially developed a reputation of doing this on a regular basis, I think that's where it gets interesting. Is it an isolated situation? Is it a regular occurrence? Is it like we all fuck up, right? Like we all do, right? So was it an isolated situation? Was it like, okay, he's just been doing this all the time, he's just really this worthless? Okay, why are you taking him on, right? That's a different, like, the circumstances of a bad actor, right? Definitely happens. Also, I think it needs to be mentioned too, Kickstarter's gotten a lot more popular in the last 2 years.
Yeah.
So there's going to be a bigger dosage of bad apples out there, or at least failures to complete, people jumping in and trying to figure this out. There is going to be an element of this for the next few years.
Yeah, and the other issue that I had, and this is another story, it was a big D&D book. It's not that hard to figure out which one it was. It did over 300,000, and all this stuff started coming out with the people behind it. And then that also messed up. And that's the other thing too, is that I think when we look also at bad actors, sometimes it's also the person to some degree. Because if somebody just murdered somebody, I mean, I think naturally you have to say they are a bad actor. Even if their book is perfect and they're on time with their book, I mean, there gets to a point where, how do you separate? Because there's lines, obviously, in society that you cannot cross, that are just terrible lines to cross, for lack of a better word. But even still, what happened with these people, they were called abusive, and there were actual legitimate claims of abuse to their employees and things of that nature. And now they have a book on Kickstarter that did 300,000 that funded. And then that becomes a complicated issue too.
Okay, so that gets super, super, super tricky on just a lot of levels. For starters, I
don't know if you know the book I'm talking about.
I don't know the book you're talking about, but I mean, I'm assuming it's a relatively decent sized company behind this book.
Small company, but big personalities. It's a good way
to put it. Okay. Well known people in the industry. Or in their industry, I should say.
It's the queen of D&D is a good way to put it.
Okay. La la la. Okay, so yes, we will avoid names to protect bank accounts, but that's neither here nor there. So it goes like this.
It's a well-known story. I mean, this is not a secret story.
Oh, okay. I'm not familiar. I'm not cool enough to know who the queen of D&D is. I know that's a weird way to say that. I'm watching what's going on with D&D
too, which is crazy. She's a friend too, which is crazier.
Okay, so
you can say whatever you gotta say. It's a free
zone. No. Actually, this kind of makes my point. This is where it gets very, 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 very dicey. There has been some controversial figures in the industry, in comics. Okay, I'll give you a good example. Warren Ellis is one of the most controversial figures in comics right this minute. There's two parts to that. Now, again, on the one hand, he had he had relations with and did some very abusive stuff with women while he was on top of the world. On the flip side, he is the most prolific author of comics of the last 30 years. There is not a part of this industry that has not been touched by this man, or either through him directly or through the people that came from his forum way back in the day. Like, to say that Warren hasn't done good things in the industry would be a lie. But it also doesn't change the fact that he's done terrible things to people too. Right? That's why you haven't seen very much of him in comics. And Ben Templesmith got harassed or got attacked because he was considering working on Fell with Warren. But here's the thing: there's three parts to this. Personal experience. There are things we all do that aren't great. Let's be perfectly honest. When there's no such thing as a perfect person. So right. I can only go by my experiences with people to judge them. There are people that I know that know you and do not like you. Right? There are people I know that cannot stand you. Then there are people I know that love you. So it goes both ways. Now, I can't judge. Now, I can go by what the people that hate you say. I can go and I could honestly see some of what they said you'd likely to have done. At the same token, that is not my experience with you. So from an experience level, right, I can't just condemn you outright. Now, at the same time, if I find out, Andrew, that you're secretly doing a sex cult and murdering people, we're out. We're just done, right? We just are, because there are certain things that just, quite frankly,
you find repugnant.
Yeah, absolutely. So you do those things, and I know there's beyond a shadow of a doubt proof that you do those things. I want nothing to do with anything you got, right? So, and everybody's that line for people is different with every single person, right? So that's always the very tricky part in this industry. Personal experience with an individual will color my perceptions of that individual, right?
Yeah, it's very tricky, because this is where I think it also gets tricky for you and me. Obviously, you have people on your show, and then I have people on my show. And this is why this becomes also complicated, because then I'm backing somebody's campaign and then they don't deliver. So obviously, my friend, and obviously on this project, she was on my show. And that's where this gets complicated. And so now, when I find out that there was allegations of abuse, there's complications in your company, there are things that you treated your employees badly or people on that thing, but I haven't seen it, but I have a good relationship with you. Now I get all messed up, because I'm like, I've had a great experience with this person. They've treated me nicely. They've never been mean to me. Every time I shoot them a message, they get back to me within a reasonable time. But I'm also hearing things, but I'm not hearing it from just one person. I'm hearing it from 4 or 5 people from different walks of life, all at different things that have some proof that they've published. And so now I'm caught in, because now I don't want to steer my audience to a bad actor, but you haven't been bad to me. But this is where it gets complicated. And so that's why this is so tricky, because
I had a guest not too long ago on my show that before I put him on the show, I had friends of mine contact and warn me about this individual. I made the decision to interview him anyway, not because I don't disagreed with what they said, but because I wanted to because I haven't seen anything he's done. That doesn't mean he's innocent of it, but it also means there is a, and some people are going to go, oh, but how can you? And it's because there's no such thing as a perfect person. We do business with each other. Sometimes, folks, it does not go well. It just doesn't. And I can hold somebody accountable for their poor choices for only so long. Now, obviously, if I find something super repugnant, like what I just mentioned earlier, I'm going to have nothing to do with you, right? But the thing about it is, again, this is where it gets incredibly tricky, because if I'm not really involved in that business, right? Now, maybe from a business standpoint, there was a well-known comic creator who basically about, I'd say 3 years ago, got caught for being a huge womanizer. He's been a friend of mine for over a decade. Okay. But he got caught, and a lot of people came out with some of the stuff he did. Right. The only piece of advice, now he won't talk about that very much now, because again, but at the same time, it was 3 years ago and he owned up to what he did. So do I hold it against him forever? That's the other part of this too.
Yeah.
Right? There are mistakes, like what I think the real thing is, okay, so probably one of the worst bad actors I've ever seen in comics. He's dead now, so I'll go out. Was a guy by the name of Rick Olney. That dude, I don't know if you know that story or not.
I don't know this.
Okay, so he would hire people, not pay them, and threaten legal action against them. Once upon a time, Gail Simoon actually exposed. No, it was epic, because Gail goes to Rick Olney. Fibber or Mega Fibber is the famous CBR. This is from the CBR forums days back in 2003, 2004, 2005. It was amazing how many people he screwed with. It was epic. And now we're not talking small names. We're talking big names in the industry that he screwed around with. It was so bad. It was so bad that there's no way, there's legitimately no way for him to recover from how terrible he was. Consequently, and I actually got employed with someone I really admire. Ironically, we fell apart due to financial and other differences. I won't condemn that individual, and I don't condemn that individual publicly, because it was my experience with them, not the world's experience with them. And there's a difference. I think when it's that, like when it's someone like a Rick Olney who's that epically egregious and just it's irredeemable, there's no way to support that. But when it's somebody that just makes an honest mistake, and I think that's the thing. Is it a serial pattern? Is it something that's constant? Is it because it's people's habits at that point you're condemning, not their
to even go further into that a little bit, because also this is my whole thing, is that let's say that, I mean, this D&D book, they've outlined a plan, at least trying to get people their books, so and trying to figure it out, but they said it was going to be done, and then they got caught in lies, and they didn't really own up to it, but they outlined a plan saying this is what it's going to look like for the next 18 months. So at least they're trying to make a step forward, but that doesn't change, because I think the book's going to be fine, but it doesn't change what has been said and how they treated people. But it is obviously, I think they're trying to do better. I think they're trying to do better, and they seem like they're trying to do better. So am I going to hold it against this company forever? No. Am I going to be a little cautious going in?
Sure. No, and that's the thing too. If someone makes the decision that, okay, I've mentioned some names in the industry. Okay. Will Warren Ellis work again in any comic company be revered the same way? Probably not. That doesn't change the fact that, again, the impact he's made on the industry. But is he a bad actor? Is he somebody that just got really famous and did what a lot of us would do with that kind of influence in an industry, and use that power? I mean, he wouldn't be the first guy to do that, right? And he's not even the most egregious guy in the industry to do that either. It's not even close. But that doesn't change the fact that he hurt a lot of people. And that's not going to change no matter how far down the road that goes. But at the same time, this is the thing. Is someone trying to change? Is someone trying to make things better? Right? There's a difference between that and then someone, deliberately choosing to be harmful. You know what I mean? There's a certain, and it's a tricky line, right? Because again, if someone was directly hurt by Warren, I wouldn't want and doesn't want anything to do with him. I can't blame him. Like why? Like I get it, right? But I mean, this is one of those things too. Like I like this is also like we all make mistakes. We all screw up. Will my mistakes in the last 10 years come back to haunt me at some point? It's possible.
Oh, I know mine will. I know
Yeah,
mine.
yeah. So, but that's the thing, right? They might. So this is where it gets really tricky. Do we judge from who the person is now, or do we judge like there's a lot to this?
So yeah. So let's talk about that too. So for instance, let's say somebody, I don't know who your enemies are, but I don't want to name anybody for the sake of naming somebody, but they were in Florida, and so they were supposed to get their book out, and clearly, they lost power. Florida's a mess because of that hurricane a little while ago. It's still a mess. And so what they basically says is that, hey, I'm sorry that I didn't have power for 2 weeks, but I have power now, and I have a huge digital library. Here's my Dropbox. Pick 2 or 3 books and let me know what you want out of my catalog, and I'll just email it to you. And we're going to get it to you as fast as we can, but we might be 4 months late. But they communicated. Nobody's angry at that person.
No.
Versus this other book that's this graphic novel that there's been no updates, no communication. And I'm at the point where I'm like, it's a cyberpunk book. And I'm kind of saying to myself, like, that phase is over a little bit. I still want to read the book. But if you have a digital copy, even if you have a digital issue 1, just to hold me over for some good faith. And so like where I'm at is, I'm kind of saying like, in order for this person to make it right, they have to get me the book, and they have to get me the book in the next 6 months, I feel. And because that would make amends, I feel, because you got me the product and you figured out how to get it done. Versus saying, because that to some degree is how you restore. And because I think there's a path of redemption in certain circumstances. If you ran away with the money and then you got somebody your book 3 years later, I'm not saying you perfectly redeemed yourself, but I think that's one way. If the biggest issue is just you're not delivering a book, then you need to deliver the book as the first step to get out of the bad actor position.
Well, okay. So I tend to, like I said, this comes down to communication and expectations and customer service ultimately. And Kickstarters is the ultimate, like it's a collector's customer base. That's what Kickstarter is. It's a collector's customer base, right? And as a result, like you gotta serve that audience. And what do collectible people want? Collectibles. That's why games do so well on Kickstarter. Like some of the stuff you see coming up down the pipe there. Holy crap! But at the same time, comics. That's why comics also have this great window up there too. But again, it's one thing to be late. Like again, lateness. I think there's a built-in for.
Oh no! I don't know what just happened. It just disappeared. I want us to talk about it. This is terrifying. It's tricky stuff, guys. It's tricky stuff. I'm just gonna wait, see when he comes back, hopefully. It's tricky stuff here. Oh boy. The one day I don't bring ads onto my show, and here we are. Yeah, so it's tricky stuff dealing with all this. It's interesting. Hopefully he'll be back in a few. Could figure it out. It's all good. I don't know what's going on. It's tricky stuff here. So yeah, so very interesting conversation, to say the least. And he's coming back in 1 second. So obviously, sometimes connections fade out, sometimes things happen, sometimes phones just die out, sometimes we get a weird connection. But I think Josh will be back in 1 sec. Um, so yeah, yeah. Fun conversation so far. Obviously, a lot more stuff to talk about, a lot more stuff to handle. Obviously, Josh is a really, really interesting individual. Just Joshing is a fantastic podcast. I like listening to it when I get a chance, and I recommend everybody else should as well. Um, Fun stuff, and yeah, so that's kind of what we're doing, and we're just waiting for him because anything could happen live, guys. Anything could happen live, and that's my whole thing. And yeah, so anything could happen live. Anything should happen live, and yeah, I like it. I like it. So yes. So I'm just waiting for Josh to get back. Obviously, things happen, but I'll just quickly promote myself. Obviously, Pop Anime Comics is my thing. A lot of fun stuff there. Obviously, I do a show. I do anywhere from 4 to 6 interviews in a given week, 16 to 20 interviews in a month, all across the board. Wrestlers, comic writers, artists, cosplayers, professional wrestlers, if I don't already mention that, voice actors, all sorts of interesting people come on my show. And I have a good time on my show, and it's an interview. It's a lot of fun. You can watch at any given point. All my episodes are free on YouTube. All my episodes are free on Facebook. I also, have an eBay store that I'm doing really cool right now on. Obviously, it's going good, bringing in a lot of cool merch that you're going to want to buy and is also hard to find. So that's something to pay attention out there. That is Pop Anime Comics Collectibles. A lot of fun. I ship out books regularly. I actually use a Gemini mailer. So one of these bad boys is called a Gemini. I'm not going to show you my address, but this is a Gemini, and it said your comics should be shipped. And I wrap them in bubble wrap as well and bag and board them so they arrive perfectly. I charge $10 to $12 depending on where I'm going to ship your book to, but it will arrive perfectly. And that's the key. You're going to pay for your book to be shipped perfectly. And so that's something that keep in mind. And yes, so yeah. So that's something that is cool. So yeah, that's eBay store, just Pop Anime Comics Collectibles. Also there's some other stuff out there that I do. Obviously, my social media is Pop Anime Comics on Twitter, Pop Anime Comics on Facebook, Pop Anime Comics on YouTube, Pop Anime Comics on Instagram. So that's something that's really cool out there as well. So that's fun. So yeah, it's a very cool in that regard, and yeah, just a lot of cool people. I'm actually not sure who I have coming on next week, and that's something to keep in mind too. Yeah, so yeah, that's how I got everything going on, and yeah, we're just waiting for Josh. Things happen, but again, it's live, so just stalling, figuring out. Obviously, internet is sometimes doesn't exactly work perfectly for us all. But yeah, a lot of fun stuff's going on, and yeah, so there you go. So that's what's going on, and a lot of fun stuff's happening, a lot of cool stuff, and yeah, so just trying to get back on, and I'm sure he'll be back on in a few minutes here, and that's what we're going to be doing. So super cool and super fun right there, and I'm just gonna send him the link, and yeah, so that's the plan, and yeah. But fun interview so far, and obviously I'm very excited. And as we're waiting around because things happen, I get it. Anything could happen live, as I was stating. A lot of fun stuff's going on. So yeah, super cool. In that regard. And hopefully he'll be back on soon. And yeah, So that's the plan. That's the plan. So hopefully, he'll be back, and yeah, we're just gonna wait a few more minutes, and obviously that's the plan. The internet is not our friend today. It's not our friend, which is perfectly fine. It's a perfectly fine thing. So obviously that's what's going on, and I'm just waiting for him to come back, and yeah. But in the meanwhile, I'm gonna just promote somebody's book. This is my friend Tyler Carpenter's book. It is The Girl with the Mega Fists. Really cool book. Fun book. It's a manga, so it's really interesting actually. So it's following the journey of Elena, a girl. I think it's Elena. Yeah, I can't speak today. A girl who has who has been chosen by the gods to wield an all-powerful mega fist and is tasked to protect Earth along with a chosen partner. And basically, what winds up happening is that this is the first time that the gods have chosen two brothers. And what winds up happening is that they're all training together, and then at the end of their training session, obviously they get attacked by one of the demons essentially down on Earth, and then she's going to have to choose the one she's attracted to or the one who is stronger. And obviously that's going to be very impactful on her defending Earth, her relationships, breaking up relationships. One of them has a girlfriend, so she chooses the one who's stronger, but that one has a girlfriend. Obviously that's going to break up that relationship. If she chooses the one that she likes, he obviously doesn't have a girlfriend, but is he going to be strong enough with her to go down and defend and, I guess, tame the enemy or keep them at bay and protect Earth? And so it really makes it very, very interesting on what she has to do. And obviously, really towards, the first volume, which I think is about 10 chapters, I want to say. I'm actually going to check right now. My friend Tyler Carpenter does a great job. He's going to be on this show. What that does is that I'm just looking in the inside. It doesn't tell me how many chapters there are, but it's a 200-page book. And so what winds up happening in that is that it's sort of them getting acquainted in the first one. The second one, obviously, they're training, trying to get stronger. And then in the third one, some stuff happens, and obviously that one didn't come out yet. But yeah, that's kind of where this book is going. And so it's super, super cool, super excited to read it. It's a fun one. I read the first one. I'm in the middle of the second one. And yeah, by the third volume, and maybe going a little into the fourth, obviously she's going to make a choice. And then they're going to be spending a bunch of time on Earth. And so it's going to be a really crazy circumstance, because no matter which man she chooses to defend Earth with, there's going to be consequences directly and indirectly for both of these young men that she's involved in and has been childhood friends with, their loved ones, their families, and also for her, because, she could be with the one she wants to be with, but will that result in a defeat, or is she going to make a logical choice? Or is it that if she chooses the one she wants to be with, that bond is going to allow them to thrive on Earth? Or is something else going to happen on Earth if she picks wrong? And then there's some other stuff that's going on. So obviously there's a lot of stuff, and Tyler does a great job with that. So that's coming out, I believe, in February. Again, for those who are seeing this, checking out Girl with the Mega Fist, really cool. This is volume 2 right here. Again, they're 200-page books, and I believe it's Draw and Talk, Tyler Carpenter. So super interesting, great stuff. Obviously, I'm in the middle of issue 2 or volume 2, and again, these are like 200-page books, and I think on Tyler's website and on his Kickstarter, because they were kickstarted, I think they were like 15 a pop. So that's something to keep in mind as well. And then the other thing I want to talk about is something that I was very fortunate enough and to read, and great book. So obviously Josh is back, but I just want to quickly promote this. It's the Bushwhackers book. And I was very fortunate to get to interview the Bushwhackers. So nice. A legendary tag team, and I was just stalling for time.
Hey, listen, straight up. the sheep herders are one of the best teams ever. And a lot of people don't know how good they were before WWE. They were amazing. They were an amazing team.
Right? I love Bushwhacker Luke. It was a very, very fun interview that I did with him.
Oh no, they seem like swell guys, and I could see why. We'll finish this side and get back to what I was saying. But the Bruce Pritchard loves them both. He actually said this, like their shelf life was a lot longer because people loved what they did. They took what they had, they were asked to do, and they had fun with it, and they did. They had a ton of fun. Most people know them as the Bushwhackers, but if you guys want to look at real hardcore wrestling, look at the Sheep Herders pre WWE. Go like in the early '80s. Holy shit! Is all I gotta say. It's like they're not cuddly at all in the '80s.
I'm gonna just say this: the book's available on Amazon, and it goes through before their time in WWE, and it's an amazing book. And I'll tell you one thing: how I'm gonna mention a controversial name here, Vince McMahon. Vince McMahon extended their careers undoubtedly. And you can say a lot of things about Vince McMahon. That is the one thing you can't say, because they became very much a comedy tag team in WWE, and that made their workload a fuck ton easier beyond. And it gave them like a good 6 or 7 years extra on their careers. But anyway, that's an aside. That's an aside.
Yeah. Well, but since we're on the subject of reputation, like I said, what this ultimately comes down to is, like I said, you can look at you want the most controversial literary figure right now is probably J.K. Rowling. So here's the thing. Everything she's saying, on the one hand, pisses a ton of people off. On the other hand, if it wasn't for J.K. Rowling, there wouldn't be a young adult industry right now. So there's good with the bad with everybody. And like our favorite literary people, comic book people, some of them were monsters. Some of them legitimately speaking. I love Isaac Asimov, but I look at a lot of pictures with him with women back in the 70s and 80s. That the women did not like him very, very much. You could definitely tell. I'm not gonna say a womanizer exactly, because that implies I think a lot of women wanted his attention. I'm not so sure they did. But he also wrote over 400 books. Like, there's good and bad with everybody, and that doesn't excuse and everybody's got to kind of make their own decisions.
I mention a name in comics that's an important name: Al Cap. Al Cap, miserable bastard of a human being, horrible human being, beyond influential for comics. Comics would not be anywhere where it would be today without Al Cap. That is a fact. And any person who says so, the industry as it sits would not be where it is without Al Cap. Horrible human being.
But again, you can look at people so bad actor sometimes is a matter of where you sit in your experience with the individual. Right? Sometimes that's the truth. You know what I mean?
Yeah, sometimes, I know that I've rubbed people the wrong way. But I know that people also said, dude, you've come through in a tough time for me. And so, that's the thing. And people have come in through for a tough time with me. And I've had people say, oh, you shouldn't interview this person. You shouldn't interview that person. And then I interviewed them and we had a pleasant experience.
Yeah.
And so it's a very weird thing and this is where I guess it gets tricky, because when somebody's laid on their book, that's a fact. But when I hear stories in comics of people, and then I'm from another person, it's very hard for me as an interviewer sometimes, because I like taking people's opinions seriously on a person if I don't know them, to be like, oh, okay, how do I determine even if you are a bad actor? And I think it's a very complicated issue. And obviously it affects me as a host of a show, because I don't want to interview somebody who's a bad actor, doesn't deliver their books, but also, I don't want to interview an axe murderer either.
So in Canada in 2019, we had a publisher. That a medium-sized science fiction publisher. They had actually gotten awards for some of their books. but the owner and the husband and wife owner were incredibly abusive to a lot of their creatives. They did not pay them anything. Some creators they took great care of. A lot of creators though were abused by these people, right? And I'm not foregoing their name because off the top of my head, the name of the publisher scares me. But if you look up 2019 book publishing scandals, you'll find them. They're relatively well known. And again, the name just is right now is just Cheesy Press. That's who it was. I know people who are still friends with some of those two, because they're not necessarily. I think most people go into this industry without necessarily the desire to hurt anybody, but the reality is things happen to all of us, right? And I'm not saying it's good or bad. Sometimes it's horrible, deliberately horrible, and people should be called out on that behavior. But there's also, I'm not going to say there's a statutory limits for the people going through the experiences they've gone through, but for the rest of the world, like the public eye, we don't know. Like, we really don't know everything. So I cannot dictate people's experiences. I don't discount them, right? So that tends sometimes to get me some trouble, because again, some of the people I've interviewed, I know this, they don't have the greatest reputations, and some of that's deserved. Some of that is, right? Absolutely. At the same time, I'm not necessarily aware of it going in, right? And also, once I kind of give my word, I kind of don't back down either. I don't back out of my word once I can make it. So some people think, well, that's horrible, you're supporting. It's like, no, that's just how I see it, right? I can't. Too much stuff happens badly that if I were to judge everybody from every bad decision they made, there would be no one I support, because there's lots of, we all screw up, all of us. What I look for in people is when they do screw up, how do they handle being accountable for it? Because that will tell me everything I need to know about that person.
Yeah, no. I mean, it's important. Yeah, no, I try to hold myself accountable for when I screw up, but also I realize that the people who hate me, and I know a bunch of them, there's no way we're ever gonna get onto common ground. And
Oh, I don't necessarily have to agree with you. In fact, I think one of the things I love about the world today is, again, we talked about a conversation I had on the air. They were upset about a quote from a certain professional wrestler, well known one, like one of the most successful guys of all time. And I read the quote and I took something very different from it than what they did, because I get it. There's a fine line, but they agree to disagree because of, their own conditions and their own circumstances. And I'm not going to hold that against them. They see it one way, I see it very much another way, right? And that's fine. I'm not upset. You take stands, you're going to piss people off, right? But in the world we live in today, in a comment for the Kickstarter, we're going to keep it strictly there. I give people one strike. They're allowed to screw up once. After that, if they screw up again, I'm out, because now it's no longer, even if it's not malicious, now I just know they don't have their shit together. And until I actually see them come through with people, I'm not going to give them another chance.
yeah, no. I mean, I could tell you it depends on the screw up. It depends on the reasoning behind it. So I'll give an example. I can't go into too much details, but somebody lost their wife and their kid.
Yeah.
Their one baby. So there was no communication, but then it came out 6 months later. So to me, your strike gets taken down.
But again, that's a very unique case, right? That's a very unique case. Most of the time, I just tell people, you don't need necessarily to tell people what's going on in terms of all the personal stuff. That's not what people need. What people need is just a little bit of an idea of what's going on, whatever that is. Obviously, it's something that serious, that dire, that you got more important shit to deal with, like you really do. No one's gonna, again, in the moment, it will look bad. In the long run, people will understand.
Yeah. So,
Right.
my point is that, and this is my question to you. I mean, obviously, I mean, where's the path of redemption? Because look, I've done some bad stuff. I made amends with some people, and obviously, there's certain people that I don't think we're ever going to see eye to eye. But also, I stay out of their lane, and hopefully, they'll stay out of mine. And so I don't really see a point with certain people, and I know the list who hates me, and I'm perfectly fine with that. Um,
Okay. So in the event
but
of a
going back
miscommunication,
to the Kickstarter thing, I mean, what is, because I believe that a bad actor can become a good one. And so I think it's very important that you can become better. So if you are late on your book or you were somewhat abusive, maybe if you say, look, I'm going to therapy, I'm making myself better, I'm going to start treating my employees better, I'm going to start taking accountability and I own up to it. I think there has to get to a point where, and then you rebuild your reputation, or, is you start getting your books in on time, for instance, you get your art in on time, and that's your reputation, or you were accused of not paying your artists and now you're paying your artists correctly. I think there is a point where we have to acknowledge that you made a mistake and that you were a bad actor, but you fixed the problem. You remediated the problem.
okay. So in the event of again, what happens in every project is you create an expectation. No matter what it is, you create an expectation. So you're not going to make people mad. Okay, if you screw up once the first time, depending on how you screw up, actually, for the most part, it can be almost any mistake, almost any of them, almost. And people will give you a pass, provided you're telling people what's going on. Kickstarter, obviously, we try to be as professional as book publishers and other things, but again, we don't necessarily have the resources they have. So Kickstarter is like lateness is probably the least cardinal sin on Kickstarter for that reason, right? Because it is going to happen. Like even with the best of intentions, shit can go wrong. But any much misunderstanding with people, ultimately, it's about intentions, impact, interpretation, right? And then that's how I do it. Let's say you wrong. Let's say I feel you wronged me. I cannot question your intentions. There's no way I can prove your intentions were good or bad. I can believe what I want, but the truth is, it doesn't matter. Just like you can't question the impact of whatever actions you've done has had on me. There's no question.
I just want to apologize. This the moment I do it.
Yeah. But the thing is, right? But in a miscommunication, often it's the interpretation of the ideas presented. And if you and I have a hash it out and we understand the other's perspective, we may not agree when it's all said and done, but we'll at least understand each other. And that's important, right? And that's important. It's not necessarily, I can walk away disagreeing with you about something and not feel any maliciousness about it at all. We just see it differently. But if I understand where you're coming, especially if I understand where you're coming from, right? If I understand where you're coming from, I'd be like, I can respect that. I don't agree, but I can respect that, right? Microcosm, macrocosm. Now let's do this. Let's apply this to Kickstarter. There is an intention of getting a product out there. For whatever reason, the impact of your intentions and the impact is if it isn't delivered in some form or fashion, something happened. So now the interpretation now is very much on the creator explaining to his audience or her audience or whatever non-binary term you just find yourself as what's going on. This is huge. Accountability can crush a lot of ill will. It can, right? It absolutely can. Accountability is probably the most important thing. If I do something and I mess up, I own my mistake. Now, that doesn't excuse it completely, but that willingness to be accountable will actually make people more likely to trust you going forward, right? It just will, because you're not ducking the issue. Now, how you correct the issue from there, because you can still lose people, but I almost guarantee you it's nowhere near as malicious. You can make this right. If I'm a world-class fuck up, and you just say, okay, he's just a world-class fuck up, right? You're gonna walk away, but you're not gonna be mad at me. You're just gonna be like, okay, he just doesn't have his shit together, right? I'm not ready for this. That is very forgiving. A lot more forgiving than now. Again, it doesn't change money, it doesn't change certain other things, but again, people's investment in you. If it's, I'm not excusing taking someone's 50 or $100 for a project, but if you assuming you're accountable, you own your shit, people are probably gonna let $100 go, probably, right? And if they can't, they're not going to support you in another project. But again, that's also a fair response. If you decide, even after I'm doing all of this, I can't support you, Josh, you suck, I got to live with that, right? I have to live with that because I've already proven that I do suck, right? There's a definitive proof of that action. But if you don't, but again, if you're in this boat of you're a quote unquote bad actor and you want to change people's perceptions of you, the first, own your shit. Own that what you've done wrong. Communicate to your audience what you're going to do to fix it, if you can fix it. And if you can't, try to find some other way to make amends. That is the correct way of doing it. Now, if you decide to go on to another project, if you decide to do something else, you owe the audience with the expectation you've created an explanation. The bad apple that worked for me has never done that. Now, if they went and actually did that to me, I would be totally more on board of doing business with them again somewhere in the future. But they haven't. Since they have not, I have no interest in dealing with them on any kind of business level. It's a very simple standard I have, right? So that's the thing. Now, it's okay to screw up, folks. It's okay to make mistakes. It's okay. Lateness is probably the most forgivable thing on Kickstarter. It is the most forgivable. It's almost an expectation at this point. The product's in January. It's probably going to be March, right? It's okay. But it is incumbent upon you, whoever your audience is, to be upfront and maintain your relationship with your audience. If you can do that, it doesn't completely discount you from your screw ups, but you can evolve. And you actually are willing to evolve, and chances are you will.
Yeah. No, I don't know. It makes sense.
Yeah. I've learned this the hard way, by the way. Most of these lessons, this stuff you're hearing from me now, folks, that's come from a lot of experience going through this process.
There are 3 words on Kickstarter that take anger away. I'm sorry.
Yes.
I am sorry. It's a very powerful statement, because you know what it does? When you say that, you're becoming very vulnerable, and you say, hey, I'm sorry. I'm in over my head. I'm doing my best to get you your book, and I promise I'll get you your book. That's a very hard, statement for somebody to say, you're a fuck up. How dare you take my money, you cheat. It's very hard to respond to that in that fashion. And even if something's late by, a month or whatever it is, or you didn't communicate in 3 months, say, hey, I'm sorry. I was dealing with a personal issue. I'm getting you your books as fast as I can. And it helps.
Yeah.
Because people have said that to me with books. And I'm like, no worries. It's perfectly fine because you said I'm sorry. You didn't say, you openly acknowledge the problem.
But yeah, and that's the key. That's the key. What you just said right there. It's not even about being vulnerable. It's about acknowledging your actions. That's it. Most people. So I'll give you a fun. Back when I still had a day job kind of deal. I had to. I was late chronically at this job. It wasn't every quarter, but there'd be the odd quarter here and there. I'd be late, and they have a late policy. So about 2 weeks or 3 weeks before they were going to do their quarterly thing to give me the letter and stuff like that, I actually went to my boss. Go, hey, listen, I know I'm late. Can we skip the lecture? Can you just give me the letter and go? He was like, yeah, sure. You know what? That's totally fine. So the day comes, I walk in. He says, yeah, you're late. How do you plead? Guilty as hell. And then just give me a letter, laughed, and walked out the door. Most jobs don't really care about your screw ups. What they care about is that you're willing to own them. Because if you're not willing to own your mistakes, how can they trust you? That's what this comes down to. And it's true in Kickstarter too. If you can own your mistakes, the most important thing, you got your word, your trust, your ability to make your audience trust you. If you lose that trust, it's over. You're dead. You're just dead. Doesn't matter. Right? Right? But if you do what you can to repair it, it is better to be looked at as just a fuck up than a liar. Right? It's a better, like the first one is a much better choice, because once people think you're full of shit, you're done.
Yep. It's very, very complicated, and it's also the idea is just, it's also how people perceive it. But obviously, I mean, it's very, very complicated, in which that, all of this and who's a bad actor and who's not, and even what constitutes that, because it is very subjective. I mean, there are people who, their book is 3 years late and people don't view them as a bad actor. And there's people who, because they're communicating or they understand that, it's expected from this person. So they're cool. I'll get my book in 3 years. What do I care?
Well, some people have earned that pass. Like, I'll give you a good example. When he was alive, so George Perez's last book for Boom was called Sirens. Right? It was late. I don't think anyone cared, because George Perez was 70 and it was George Perez.
I'll throw another book out there that very few people know that was actually a late book. The Killing Joke.
Yeah.
The Killing Joke was late for those who don't know that. But no, everybody was like, oh man, this motherfucker. Can he just write the motherfucking book, please? And people were pissed, because they weren't pissed because they were upset that it was late. They wanted to read it. And then they all sat down and they read it. They're like, yeah, it was worth the wait.
Well, I think the thing you got to remember in comics, no one remembers that Watchmen was late. No one remembers that, heck, The Last Ronin last year, it was late. Like, it became a late book as it got later and later. I didn't care, right? I didn't care, because I was a good product, and that also goes a long way too. You have a good reputation for making a quality product. It comes down to trust, folks. It comes down to trust. It's not if you are trusted in the quality of your work, you're trusted in your word, you're trusted in who you are, right? There comes a point that people will just give you that pass, but you got to earn that trust. If you have it, you're gold, but you got to get there. Now, when you're starting in the industry, you got to get there. So it's doing all the little things right to keep trust. Because once you got it, you can do what you want. That's just how it works.
Yep, very true, very true, very true. And I know that there's certain things I could get away with as an interviewer with certain people and in certain companies in certain areas, and it's golden. It's beautiful, and It's a very important thing to understand it and also not, I guess, flaunt it and not abuse it. And that's the other thing too, is that you could burn that bridge so damn quickly.
Well, it's okay. So as an interviewer, okay, so my show, I just bullshit with people, right? That's what I do, right? We have a good conversation about. I ended up talking yesterday about a murder fort with crocodiles and Persona 5. I could have gone a little longer with this conversation, but I was exhausted. Like just I had like an hour and a half sleep, and I was doing all kinds of work yesterday, and just went. But the point was that yeah, I mean, but here's the thing. The point of my show is to let people come in. I've talked to people about some very controversial things just as a casual conversation. But then I also just talk about glitter. I have earned the reputation that I'm not deliberately malicious. And so people will give me a certain pass. I'm not going to blindside people. I'm not interested in exposing people about this, these great giant, like people with reputations. I'm not necessarily intense. I'm hashing out old grudges. I don't care. I'll talk to you about glitter or unicorns. I don't give a shit, right? I just don't, right? But that's me, and that's being honest. And anyone that coming in to be interviewed by me, we have that understanding going in. And there are some people you interview, you just realize there are some things you're just not going to be able to talk to them about. And there are other things that you can. You know, and that's just the way it is.
I mean, people know that I'm going to do research, and I know my guests really, really well, and that's what my reputation is. I'm going to read your book. If you send it to me, I'm going to go through your Kickstarter. I'm actually going to think about it. I prep up questions, and I'm going to be asking you questions about your book, and you know, it's not a controversial interview, but we're going to talk about it, and you know, it's about you. And that's the whole thing. So, yeah. And so people know to prepare for my show. You better know your book. That's all I'm going to say. To go on my show. But anyway, I don't know if that's you or me on the fire truck.
I'm disappearing here. I heard most of that. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm still here. I was just asking.
Okay, yeah. No, I went in and out again. So, folks, I got to confess something. Like, I'm getting a new computer in like 3 weeks because this one is near the end of its lifespan. Did you get that?
Yes. A funny story. So what happened to me about 3 months ago is that this computer had to be put down because I don't know if anybody can see it, but what happens in a Mac, it's probably not the best way how to do this, is that after about 1,100 charges on a Mac, your battery starts to expand.
Yep.
So this thing was actually spinning out of control at the end of every interview. So there was 2 interviews, and then 2 days before I finished the interview, and 5 minutes later it crashed. And I was like, I just made it through a very, very like narrow by like the hair on my chin, for lack of a better word.
Yes.
So I feel you. I'm very sympathetic, and I understand the pain. So it's all right. We're all understanding, and we're all sympathetic, and it's only 3 weeks, 21 days.
Yeah, about 3 weeks, then it'll be all said and done, give or take. So yeah, it took about 10 more interviews and a bunch of video stuff, and yeah, it'll be there. And it's gonna be nice to actually have a little bit more advanced system somewhere. Can you still hear me? Because I've seen the time going up, but I'm not sure. You're not moving anymore.
Oh, I was just standing purposely just to mess with you.
Okay. No, it's frozen. No, legit frozen. I'm going to.
I don't know if you can hear me.
Yeah, like I don't know what's going on there. To be honest with you, with my graphics card, I'm going to try to do a quick little reset here. Do you want me to wrap up the show? Just because I don't know how this is going to work coming back.
So, can you hear me or no?
I hear you, but you're kind of going like you're kind of like an echoey thing, and you're still not moving on my screen.
Okay, yeah, we just wrap it up. I'll just wrap
it up.
Oh, no.
Okay, now you're back. Oh,
no, that's perfect. So I think this is a good time to wrap up. Obviously, your computer is deciding that it's calling an audible.
It is. It's called an audible. Yes, it is.
But obviously, I want to give you a chance for people to know where they could find you, social media, obviously, website, all that stuff, because that is very important at this stage in the game. Obviously, you did it at the front of the show, but I also want to give you the opportunity to do it at the end of the show.
So, folks, I'm just sending a message to him because he's a trained professional and stuff like that. That is my website for advertising. If you want to go check that out there, Andrew, if you see it, you can copy paste
in the comment sections.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Trained professional right there, folks. That's trained motherfucking professional right there. So I do an advertising page right there. You can have to come check me out. If you're looking to build your project for yourselves, I'm very good at building people up, and I definitely can help you. I've done longer shows. If you want me to produce a show for you, I am your guy for that as well. Right. You can find me there. And the big website is without all that. You can find me on Josh. Just look up my name, Josh Pentalresco. I am absolutely everywhere. I'm kind of one of a kind. And fortunately, or unfortunately, depending on who you are. Right. But that all said, folks, remember the day, build bridges at all times, trust each other, understand, even if you don't agree. And thanks for having me on the show, buddy.
Yeah, anytime. And when you launch your project, I'm sure you'll be back on my show and we'll talk about your book. But I'm going to quickly say about me. Obviously, I am Pop Anime Comics on social media. That's Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. I'm not that hard to find. I'm Andrew Davis on Facebook. I'm Andrew Mecca Davis. I am pretty accessible across all platforms. And I am launching a very cool class soon. It's just been derailed for a lot of reasons. I like talking about money in comics. And I like explaining that, and I want everybody who wants to become a comic book investor to become one. And so I'm working on the class. I just did not like the way it sounded the first round, so I'm re-recording the whole thing. And, because I don't want to deliver a shit product, personally. And I want everybody who wants to do this to have a skill set. And I'm thinking $40 a price point for about 22 hours of my class on Udemy. So it's not bad, guys. Again, that's where I'm at, but that's probably later this year, just because I got a lot of other stuff going on personally that I do not want to talk about at the moment. That's for a later day, later video. But yeah, support me on social media. I appreciate a follow. It means a lot to me. And I think that wraps up this episode, everybody. So thanks for hanging out, and I hope you enjoy it, and we'll catch you in the next one.